If you have planets in the fourth house, you have absolute superpowers, but you have to be patient. The start of the fourth house is one of the most critical angles in a natal chart. It's the imam coli, the IC. This is the most private, personal part of a natal chart. It's associated with the archetypes of our early being. It's our childhood, our rearing by our parents, our relationship with our parents. It represents how we are conditioned, as well as our subconscious, our unconscious, our most instinctual, inherited parts of ourselves. And we think about what the moon represents in astrology. The moon represents our most private selves, whereas the sun represents our ego. It's how we operationalize our natal chart. It's the decisions that we make. It is how we choose to balance and what the sum of all the parts look like. Our lunar life, on the other hand, it's happening mostly internally, and we can express that and we can share those feelings, but a piece of them, right? So much of that is happening. It's not spoken, it's felt. Sometimes it's not even being passed through the intellect. It's our reactions to someone cutting us off in traffic. It's our feeling of rejection in a social or romantic situation. It's our feeling of frustration. It's what gives us meaning or inspires us. So when you bring those themes into looking at the fourth house, the IC, it's a good starting spot. But the fourth house, it's broader than that. Archetypes associated with the moon and what the IC represents, it's not interchangeable. Whereas the moon represents our inner instinctual private personality, the fourth house describes our experience of our private personality as a domain of our life. It's that process of coming to bear and bringing to bear our psychological inheritances. It's bringing to bear our conditioning. It's bringing to bear our nature and our nurture. It's bringing the subconscious and the unconscious more conscious. It is coming to hopefully understand what these things are below that drive us. The activities and energies of the fourth house show us how we are going to create a sense of safety in our lives in every sense of the word. Material safety, sure. Emotional safety, sure. But more than anything, it's a spiritual sense of safety. This part of our chart is telling us about how everything began inside of us and where it all might end, and kind of what we do in between those two bookends is up to us. The fourth house is typically associated with the mother. Some astrologers like Liz Green say actually it might say more about our relationship with the father, actually, which makes sense, right? 10th house, Capricorn, that is typically the paternalistic, fatherly kind of domain. But you could look at it to the extent that there is heightened activity in the fourth house, means that there's going to be a counterbalance on the opposite end of that domain of life. In either case, it says a lot about our relationship with our parents, what we inherit from our parents. The IC-MC axis is the process in life of working with that inheritance, that psychological inheritance, and how we do or do not choose to wield it in terms of projecting ourselves outwardly, of conquering, of going and exploring and making our mark on the world. All these 10th house MC themes. People that are born with planets, any planets in the fourth house, this process is going to take on heightened importance. Regardless of the planet in the fourth house, if there's any planets at all, it means that the individual is going to have a more intense or more heightened private life. It could mean that this particular individual chooses to put on a bit of a mask at work, go and get the job done, but at home maybe they indulge different parts of themselves. Or it could be someone that has a lot of sort of psychic work to do. There's different parts of themselves, there could be different influences, different traumas that need to be brought to conscious awareness. Depending on what planets are in the fourth house, it'll tell us a little bit more about what those influences might be. Fourth house planet people are people that you could say still waters run deep. There's more than meets the eye. You can't just get to know them on a surface level small talk conversation or an intro meeting. There's more layers of the onion to kind of keep pulling back. Some people, some fourth house planet people are more aware of it than others. Some people, if they haven't totally integrated some of those influences, they can come out in unexpected ways. Or if they try to bob it down or push it down, you can't always just keep it contained. It comes out in other ways, maybe unconsciously. In many cases, people with planets in the fourth house are typically late bloomers in life. So this is fantastic news if you have planets in the fourth house and you feel like, God, like there's so many lessons that you're learning and it's like you can't quite get it right and you feel like you're just not keeping up, or you've had to do extra work on yourself just to get to the same starting point as other people, which is a bad way of looking at life. You should never be comparing where you're starting from or your progress with other people, but that's what a highly emphasized fourth house can feel like. The fourth house has been described as our astrological womb. And the key to remember here is that planets in the fourth house take longer to germinate. There's a greater emphasis on the process of building roots and how an individual chooses to build the foundation upon which they launch off in the rest of their life and different aspects of their life is going to be really pronounced for them. Having a planet like Pluto in the fourth house usually indicates a lot of inherited family trauma, really challenging early life experiences, really a lot of dark, like there's a dark energy deep in the recesses of the individual that's going to need to be healed before the individual is really going to be able to live their life and project themselves in a really authentic and aligned and productive way. If they don't deal with that, it's going to come out in other ways. Sometimes with a Pluto in a fourth house, you'll see broken homes, death of a parent. I have Pluto in the fourth house, lost my father at a young age, did not have the most textbook early family life. Pluto there is a whopper, but no matter what kind of planet you have in the fourth house, whether it's a traditionally, benefic considered planet or a malefic, there's always going to be tremendous opportunity for power and self-mastery. This is the ultimate spot of the chart where we really do like this existential spiritual audit of who we really are without any other strings attached, without any other ways to define us. Who are we outside of our possessions, outside of what we know, outside of what our job is, outside of what our relationship is, who our friends are? You may think like, what is even left after that? Well, that's a little bit the riddle and the karmic lesson and growth path for someone that has a lot of planets in the fourth house. Saturn here means that there could be a resistance to really engaging in knowing thyself. There could be a lot of resistance to being really present with their innermost subconscious emotions. There could be a lot of unconscious resistance, or maybe the individual grew up in a really hard, anti-emotional, anti-nurturing kind of environment. But a Saturn here, though, is going to force the individual through external events or through the consequences of their own sort of subconscious actions of undealt with fourth house issues. It's going to force them to have to confront those regardless. It's a little bit like a sink or swim type of house. You can't build any kind of life, you can't build any kind of house on a broken or crooked foundation. And that's why the fourth house can be tremendously beautiful. And once fourth house themes are integrated, it usually means a fantastically auspicious, benefic, powerful second half of life when you've built this incredible foundation. And it may seem like it took so long to do it, but once you get it, it's like suddenly everything else falls into place. On the other hand, when you're in the midst of struggling with fourth house issues or challenging placements, it can feel like hell. It can feel like there's nothing left to hold on to. It's like you're in quicksand or you're SOL without a paddle. It feels like you sometimes are spiritually homeless. And in that situation, you're only able to do one thing. You figure out how to construct that home for yourself without having to rely on more impermanent or superficial substitutes for that. The more traditionally benefic planets like Venus or Jupiter in the fourth house are tremendously auspicious, and people with these placements might find that their journey through the fourth house is actually, I wouldn't say enjoyable, but it's a little bit more natural for them. I would still say these individuals can tend to be late bloomers because every lesson is an opportunity for self-learning. They go so deep, right? Everything is a source of meaning for them, even the smallest things, especially with Venus and Jupiter here. With Venus there, it's like the creation of harmony, the identification of harmony, feeling a sense of beauty or appreciating beauty is caught up in this idea of creating deep meaning, of cultivating deep meaning, of building a very strong connection with one's inner life, with one's soul. I haven't even said that word throughout this whole video, but the fourth house, it's about your soul. And we can think about the soul in a lot of different ways, but sometimes the more you think about it, the more you kind of get far away from it. You have Mars here, your sense of personal power, your sense of your ability to affect and create and manifest in the world around you comes from a foundation of inner knowing, of inner meaning. It is complete confidence and strength that's brought and wrought from that foundation, that comfort with oneself, that confidence that nothing can take you away from that, or no one can take that sense of home or safety away from you. And so it's a spot for Mars where it coils, right? It coils. And when fourth house themes are really well integrated, it's a tremendous power because Mars coils here like nowhere else in the chart, and it's able to explode off into the rest of the chart. And when one becomes conscious of their fourth house, of their unconscious, of their soul, and really has chosen to live a life in service of their soul, they can direct that will outwardly in any direction they want with tremendous precision. People with the Sun or Mercury here, these are going to be, again, very soulful type people. There's going to be a strong preoccupation with lineage and inheritance and psychic inheritance. And there's going to be a strong interest in psychoanalysis and in a desire to want to unpack things and, again, to assign meaning. We're talking here in the fourth house about building meaning and feeling meaning. And the 10th house, we're talking about conquering and achieving and exploring and venturing. And the fourth house is really about that building and coiling and assigning meaning here, right where you are. There's a strong impulse here for individuals that have pronounced fourth house to give back, ultimately, to give back as parents, to have children themselves, or to mentor, or to teach. There is this feeling of having accomplished very deep, far-reaching personal lessons. There's a lot of wisdom to be gained, and there's an impulse to share that. It's a feeling like I went through all this stuff and I want to help someone else that's struggling through those same things. I want to give the perspective that I had. A lot of times, again, consistent with the theme of being a bit of a late bloomer, sometimes parenthood happens maybe later in life, but it's hard sometimes for an individual to completely shake that impulse. And it doesn't always mean giving birth to children or fathering or mothering children. Again, it can be sharing wisdom in sort of a paternalistic, maternalistic way with friends. It's being able to parent sometimes friends, not in a weird or a toxic way, but maybe having gone through grief or loss. For someone with hard fourth house energies or aspects, they now, having gone through that experience and gained the wisdom from it, when a friend has to go through that experience, there's a desire to want to be there for them and share that. And it's a realization that I went through this really hard thing, but it brought me meaning. And in order to kind of make the world go round, I now am able to give that meaning and that understanding and that empathy to people that need it when they're going through it. For better or worse, people with a highly emphasized fourth house, there's a process of coming into your own spiritual shoes. It's becoming your own parent. It's becoming your own arbiter, your own caretaker, your own nurturer. Kind of becoming self-reliant in the deepest sense of it. Not self-reliant in terms of, well, I got enough money in the bank to pay my bills if I ever lost my job. No, it's like that feeling of like, I don't need anyone else. I don't need anything else to assure myself that I'm okay, or to remind myself that I'm okay. The fourth house is about giving ourselves permission to do the things we want to do. It presupposes everything else that happens in the chart. And when we talk about pursuing our goals or manifestation, the fourth house is really, it's that plane where we decide, okay, I am worthy, I have self-worth. If I want to go out and achieve X, or if I want X job, or I want to go and live in this place, I deserve that. And to the extent that someone is avoiding fourth house lessons, fourth house challenges, the outward activity, the outward goals, they're always going to be sabotaged because the underlying plane is not resolved. The underlying plane has not been dealt with. And so you project unresolved or unchallenged or repressed energies into all your efforts outward. So you could be super talented. You could be the most talented, hardworking person in the world. But until you deal with the fourth house on a conscious level, you are going to unconsciously make decisions or project self-sabotaging energy into the things you do. So it is the place where we decide who we are, what we want, decide that we are safe, decide how we make ourselves safe. And that's, again, a process of coming to terms with our childhood, our life, who we are, and as we go through life, how we truly nurture and create harmony with our soul.